Yes, I did.
Good afternoon. Welcome to our July 9th, 2024 Landmark Preservation Commission meeting. I will call the meeting to order at 1:00 p.m. First, we'll start with an introduction of the commissioners. My name is Erica Warzel. I'm an architectural historian and preservation consultant, and I was nominated by the community at large.
My name is Graham Johnson. I'm a preservation project manager nominated by the Denver Planning Board.
I'm Nick Fusianis. I'm an architect and a developer, and I was nominated by the American Institute of Architects.
I'm Larry Sykes. I'm an architect and I was nominated by History Colorado.
Hello, I'm George Dennis, retired law enforcement, nominated by History Colorado.
And I'm Rusty Brown with Simple Brown Design, architect, nominated by AIA.
Great, thank you, and welcome, Rusty.
Thank you.
I will briefly go over some audio tips for those of us joining virtually by Zoom. For better sound quality, we encourage you to download the Zoom app on your desktop or other device, and then to click audio settings to bring up additional menus that add background noise suppression and to test your speaker and microphone to adjust their maximum output volumes. And then for presenters or public commenters, when it's your turn to speak, you can unmute or mute as needed on the microphone icon at the bottom of your screen. And then if you expand the menu next to the microphone, that will reveal additional options to adjust your speaker and microphone and test it for their volumes. If you still have any audio challenges, we recommend that you switch to phone for audio. Now we will review our 2 meeting minute records that we had for today for June 4th and June 18th. Do any commissioners have any comments or clarifications they'd like to make? If not, may I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move to approve meeting records for June 4th and June 18th, 2024.
Thank you, Graham.
Second.
Thank you, George, for seconding. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstained? Thank you, Rusty, for abstaining. And the motion has passed to approve both records. All right, now moving right along, this is our public comment period. This is for comments about preservation in general in the city. This is not about any specific projects on our agenda today. If you're here to speak about those, you'll have a chance when the time comes. But this is just for general comment on preservation. Anyone who would like to speak has up to 2 minutes. Is there anyone here in person or online that would like to make a comment? No hands raised. Look like it? Okay, thank you. And then we have our consent agenda. These are routine design review items that are recommended for commission approval without discussion. Applicants with items passed on the consent agenda should coordinate separately with your landmark preservation staff member to receive a certificate of appropriateness. There's no public comment for consent agenda items. So I'll announce all of our 7 consent agenda items by address, and then we'll ask if any commissioners have a desire to remove any from the agenda and discuss them during the design review portion of our meeting. Any commission members will have a chance to announce ex parte contacts or conflicts of interest, and then we'll consider a motion and vote. Our consent agenda items today are number 2024-COA-350 for 2244 Grove Street in Whittier-Cofield District. 2024 TAXC-006 at 2217 Grove Street, also in Whittier-Cofield. 2024-COA-035 at 3659 Alcott Street in the Potter Highlands Historic District. 2024-COA-357 at 1920 East 7th Avenue in the East 7th Avenue District. 2024-COA-359 at 2335 Hooker Street in Whitter Cofield. 2024-COA-275 at 556 Ogden Street in Alamo Placita. And finally, 2024-COA-272 at 730 Gilpin Street in the East 7th Avenue District. Commissioners, do any of you have, would any of you like to remove an item from our agenda to the design review? Any ex parte contacts or conflicts of interest? Great, then we'll, I'll open it up for a motion.
Madam Chair. Oh, go ahead, George.
Madam Chair, I move the consent agenda be approved as read.
Thank you, George.
Second.
Thank you, Nick. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstained? Great, the consent agenda has been approved. Those of you who are joining us for items on this agenda are welcome to leave the meeting, or of course, you're welcome to stay and listen in on the rest of the meeting as well. Next, we'll move on to our one public hearing item for our agenda today. I will go through the process here. First, I'll announce the agenda by address and then ask any commission members to announce conflicts of interest or ex parte contacts. We'll hear from staff about the application and their recommendation, at which time commissioners may question staff. Then we'll hear from the applicant, which together those applicant members may present up to 10 minutes. And then commissioners will have a chance to question the applicant at that time. And then we'll open it up for public comment. Anyone in the public who would like to make a comment on this project or hearing will have up to 3 minutes per person. We'll ask that you begin with your name and address for the record. If you would like to speak about it and you're online, you can raise your hand via the hand raise button in Zoom, or you can dial *9 to raise your hand through your phone. If you're having difficulty with either of these options, please email landmark@denvergov.org with your name and phone number to ask to be added for public comment. Then we'll have a chance to hear from any staff for staff clarifications if needed, and then we'll move into deliberation for a motion and vote. So I will call the public hearing open. And this is for project 2024-LMDEMO-119 at 2650 Welton Street in the Five Points Cultural District. Do any commissioner members have conflicts of interest or ex parte contacts you'd like to make us aware of?
I have a potential conflict on this. Simple Brown Design, firm I work for, is a sub-consultant to Crane Architects, who are the architect on the project. Our responsibility is interior design.
So our attorney has asked that you may want to consider recusal for the Rossonian project, as it may create the appearance of impropriety. However, if you are comfortable with that, and then can also determine whether you can be fair and impartial judge on this project, you may remain, but our attorney is here now if you have any additional questions for him regarding service.
So my firm is interior designer as a consultant to Crane Architects, who are the architect on Rosonia. I believe I can act fair and impartially in this, but I'm willing to recuse if necessary.
I think, with what Brittany's already said, if you do believe that you can be fair and impartial, probably proceed and hear the case on the merits. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, that's fine with me.
Okay, thank you, Rusty. Right, okay.
So our first project on the agenda for review today is demolition of the historic Rossonian roof. which you can see dashed and shaded here in this image, and then also some images of the roof. The annex building was previously approved for demolition and was constructed in the 1990s and is not historic, but also will be demolished as part of this project. And the entirety of this project scope relates to the redevelopment of the Rossonian as a hotel restaurant space with a new 8-story addition to the south. So the Landmark Preservation Commission requires a public hearing for 40% more demolition of the exterior roof. So this property was publicly noticed for demolition on June 25th. Email notification was sent to all RNOs within 200 feet of this property on June 11th. And again, notice was placed on the 25th. So the commission will evaluate this request to demolish prior to reviewing the proposed rehabilitation of the Rossonian and the phase 2 design details for the new infill hotel addition. So the Rossonian Hotel is located in the heart of the Five Points Historic Cultural District. It is the tallest building within the district that is a contributing historic structure. It was originally known as the Baxter Hotel. You can see that historic sign on the Chamford corner. It was purchased by H.W. Ross in 1929 and renamed the Rossonian after him. The Rossonian became the most important jazz club between Kansas City and Los Angeles, hosting jazz legends such as Paul Robinson, Duke Ellington, Nat King Cole, Ella Fitzgerald, Billie Holiday, Count Basie, and others. Sorry. In the 1960s, 1990s, the building condition began to decline as African Americans were no longer required to live and recreate in the Five Points districts. In 1993, prior to the National Register listing and the 1995 district designation and the updates in 2015 to that district designation, the building underwent a heavy restoration that included new walls and the interior plumbing, electrical upgrades, the addition of the annex building, which you can see outlined here for demolition that the commission has already reviewed and approved, and total window replacement. The Rossonian has been in a state of disuse for several years, and the roof has deteriorated and does need to be demolished to address its deteriorated condition. So staff are generally supportive of the roof demolition as we feel that the overall form, materials, and features of the original roof, such as the cornice line, will not be altered in this demolition request. The flat roof is not visible to the public from the public right of way, and the overall form will be maintained when the roof is rebuilt. Additionally, we feel that this is a necessary step in this project scope and are supportive with the condition that the replacement plan be approved prior to demolition of the existing roof.
Thank you, Brittany. Commissioners, do you have any questions for staff? Okay, I think we're ready to hear from the applicant. Then you have together up to 10 minutes, and if you would begin with your name and address for our records.
And if you guys could hold on until we get the computer up and running. I'm so sorry. No, it's okay, Taylor. It's over. Okay, so where's the second one? No presentation up for this, or just for this?
This is fine.
Just for those of you online, we're just dealing with a little bit of technical difficulties, but we'll be up and running in a few minutes.
I know, I just have to promote it and then.
All right, so looks like that's ready to go. My name is Brad Gassman, I'm with Crane Architecture.
Will you turn the camera on?
Hold on 1 second, it's actually, I need to promote it. So, yeah, accept on that. Yes.
There you go, okay.
Thank you, Julie. Okay. Does he need to unmute? No, okay.
All right, thank you. My name is Brad Gassman, I'm with Crane Architecture, 2490 Welton Street.
Dan Crane, Crane Architecture, 2490 Welton Street.
Matt Mueller, Palisade Partners, 2700 South Broadway.
Just like to thank the commission for hearing us on the Rossonian roof replacement. I think Brittany did a pretty nice job of going through kind of the extent of what we're looking at. We're looking to remove the historic roof from the Rossonian. None of the facades around the building will be touched at all. With this removal, it's necessary because of the deterioration of it hasn't been maintained for quite some time. And it's also an opportunity for us to help use this new roof structure to secure the walls. Some walls on Washington Street are actually pulling away from the facade. So this is part of that overall structural remediation to preserve and rehabilitate the Rossonian.
Oh, good.
Yep, we're good.
Okay, thank
Thank
you. Commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicants? No. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Next, we'll open it up for public comments. Again, if you'd like to make a comment on this project, you can raise your hand in Zoom or dial *9 on your keypad if joining by phone. Or email us at landmark@denvergov.org if you have any trouble with those options. If you would like to make a comment, you have up to 3 minutes. One here. Keith, we'll start here. And you know the drill, but if you start with your name and address.
Keith Pryor, 2418 Champa Street, Chair of the Five Points Historic Cultural District Design Review. Brittany did a great job with this in the review, and the design team. It's pretty straight, clear, and forward. Definitely want to recommend approval with the condition set forth that the design detail be approved. That is coming to you next. This is exciting for this project, and it is key and integral to the overall success of the project with the demolition of the 2 adjacent properties and making sure that the fire rating systems all function appropriately, and the facade itself will be left intact, but for other programming modulars as well as the fire integration system, this is a critical component of that, and I do ask the commission to approve this demolition. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Anyone else here in person? Do we have anyone joining by phone or Zoom?
No hands up.
And the letter from Historic Denver was about this project or?
Correct.
Okay, so we did receive letter from Historic Denver and from the RNO about this project, both in favor. So if there's no other comments publicly, I think we can go to staff. Any recap?
No recap for me.
Okay, all right, then commissioners will, I will close the public hearing and then we can move into deliberations. What are your thoughts?
I think this seems pretty straightforward. It's not changing the look, so I agree with staff's assessment here. It's a major undertaking. It'll be fun to watch it happen when it does.
I can't wait to see this. When does it open?
All right. If there are no other comments, I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I'll move to approve application 2024-LN demo -119 for the total roof demolition at 2650 Welton Street. Per intent statement 2B, design guidelines 2.24 and 2.55. Character defining features for the 5 Points Historic Cultural District. Presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report with the condition that the replacement plan for the roof reconstruction be reviewed and approved prior to demolition.
Thank you, Graham. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Larry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstained? All right, the motion passes. Thank you. Okay. We'll be moving into our design review portion of the agenda. We'll get that process up here. So the review process, the design review, I'll announce each item as we move through it in order by its address. Again, ask commission members to announce any ex parte contacts or conflicts of interest. We'll then hear from staff about the application and their recommendation, at which time we may question the staff. And then the applicant will be able to present for up to 10 minutes, at which time we'll be able to question the applicant again. And then we'll hear from any public commenters who would like to speak on the project. They'll each have 2 minutes to speak. Again, if you would like to speak, you may raise your hand via Zoom or call, dial *9 on your phone and email us if with any trouble you may have with that. Then we'll hear from staff for any clarifications if needed before we move into deliberation for a motion and vote. Okay, so first on our design review agenda is item 2024-COA 373 at 2650 Welton Street in the 5 Points Cultural District for the roof reconstruction, rehabilitation, and new construction at the Rossonian. Yes, commissioners, do you have any ex parte contacts or conflicts of interest you'd like to announce?
Same potential conflict as the public hearing. I believe I can act fairly and impartially in assessing this.
Okay, thank you, Rusty. All right.
Okay, so I will first go over the rehabilitation of the historic Rossonian and then finish out with the phase 2 design details for the new 8-story infill that will be constructed south of the Rossonian. So here we have some historic photographs of the Rossonian Hotel from 1938, the 1950s, 1987, and currently. So again, the Rossonian has been underutilized and is in a state of disrepair and does need pretty significant rehabilitation work to bring it back up to its former glory. As part of the rehabilitation, the roof structure will be reconstructed, and on top of the new roof, there will be some rooftop mechanical equipment, but there is no other elements proposed for the rooftop. The rooftop mechanical will not be visible from the public right of way, so staff are not concerned over that. So as part of the rehabilitation of the Rossonian, several elements will be addressed that are deteriorated, including the building cornice, some of the brick and some of the mortar joints. Much of that project scope is actually not within the purview of the Landmark Preservation Commission, such as the painting of the trim elements, repointing, etc. That's not something that we technically have to review, but will be part of the overall project scope. As I previously mentioned, all of the windows were replaced in 1993, and those wood windows are proposed to be replaced again with new aluminum clad wood double hung windows, as you can see here in this image. So all of the windows on the Rossonian will be replaced. They will be inset into the wall plane, as these are not historic windows. We did not require an assessment on the condition of these windows. Staff are supportive of the replacement windows, as they do match the original historic character of the Rossonian, and there will be no change in the opening sizes. The headers and sills will remain intact, and windows will remain double hung windows. Windows will be operable on this portion of the hotel. They will not be operable on the new infill portion of the hotel. So all of the storefronts are also non-historic. They are proposed to be totally replaced and reconstructed. The current storefronts have a stucco kick plate. The new storefronts will have a metal kick plate with new aluminum storefront systems and transoms, which match details found in the historic photographs. Generally speaking, most of the bay articulations will remain the same, with the exception of the furthest most bay on the Washington Street elevation that I mentioned in the phase 1 review that was re-reviewed by the commission in May. That will be altered into a double entrance to allow for the primary entrance into the historic Rossonian Hotel, and that will be the new primary entrance for this hotel development. So here is that bay that is again proposed to be altered from a single entrance to a double entrance. It will also have a new canopy and a new signage that replicates the historic Rossonian signage that is located along Welton Street and is on the canopy at the Chamford entrance. Here you can really see that metal kick plate detail and those large plate glass windows with transoms above. As I mentioned, the signage will be restored. All of the signage is within the period of significance. The Rossonian has had a few different configurations for its historic signage. Right now it has a horizontal sign along Welton Street. It did previously have a vertical sign along Welton Street, but the horizontal sign is proposed to be restored as part of this project, as well as the signage along the canopy that at the Chamford entrance. And the Baxter sign will remain as well. This is all supported by the 5 Points Design Standards and Guidelines, which really encourages the retention and restoration of historic signs within the district that contribute to the overall character. So all of those elements will be restored. I previously thought that this project scope involved the restoration of the block glass that is around the Chamford entrance and the entrance around along Welton Street. However, the applicant did point out to me that they are proposing to remove that glass block and replace it with side lights. I do have some concern over this scope of work because the period of significance for this district is up until the 1960s. And it does appear that that glass block was installed within that period of significance. And I do think it contributes to the overall character of the Rossonian. So I would like the commission to further discuss this, as I did not point it out in my staff report, as the project scope has changed a few times and I just misread the plans. So again, glass block is proposed to be removed in this current project scope and replaced with glass side lights. The doors that you see here are in recessed balconies. These are the original doors, the only original doors. They will be replaced in kind to match the existing character. And you can see that there is a metal rail on this balcony. That metal rail will remain intact, however, it's not code compliant. So to bring it up to code compliance, a glass railing will be installed behind that rail. It's significantly recessed behind the railing, and so staff feel it will have a very visual minimal impact on that railing and helps preserve the character of that original opening and configuration while coming up to code compliant height for a railing. So that is all I have on the restoration. Moving along to the phase 2 design details. So the commission has reviewed this phase 1 a couple of times, mostly in 2019, but more recently in 2024 to refresh the commission on the project scope and also to address some of the massing changes that had occurred to the building base. But the new 8-story addition will be connected to the Rissonian with a glass connector element as recommended by the design guidelines for the 5 Points Historic District. It will have a 3-story building base along Welton Street and 5 Points. At the 4th story, that 4th story is actually recessed a little bit to allow for a rooftop deck, which is also encouraged by the design guidelines to use upper story setbacks as green spaces. And then the 5th through the 7th story will be clad in brick, and then the 8th story is recessed also, and that will have some rooftop deck space for the hotel use, but it's much more minimal than on the 4th floor. And then there is a metal mechanical screen proposed as well on top of the new addition. Again, this is all going to be a hotel use. The primary entrance is reoriented onto Washington Street, but there are some historic entries along Welton Street. The building does have storefront appearance that will have planters placed in front of it, but the glass will remain active and visible behind. And we did review all that in the phase 1 submittal. So here's the Washington Street elevation. Along Washington Street, a new outdoor patio will be installed. It is a metal rail 3 feet in height. It is recommended in the design guidelines and standards for 5 Points to use the name streets as public patio spaces, as Welton Street is very narrow due to the light rail. So it is recommended to activate those with outdoor patios. Here you can see the new hotel entrance in the furthermost bay on the historic Rissonian. Again, that glass transition, and then the 3-story building base that will be constructed of brick, and then the upper stories that are set back that will also be constructed of brick. It is intended to be a blended brick, 20% light gray and 70% cream brick to complement and match the colors of the Rissonian Hotel. This portion of the building that is at the building base does begin to turn the corner at the alley. So you do have some storefront here, but it also transitions into a more service-oriented area of the building. So you do also have metal louvers in the storefront at the bottom as well. The upper story does cantilever a bit over the historic Rissonian Hotel, but again, as the 4th floor of the new addition is significantly inset, that cantilever is set back well over 60 feet and was reviewed in the phase 1 submittal. It is also clad in brick. Again, the entire addition will be clad in brick. There is a metal trellis that will provide some shade for that upper floor that you can see here in that elevation, but this will be minimally impactful from the public right of way. And then finally, this is the alley elevation. Again, you have louvers down at the bottom because this is a more service-oriented area, louvers on the 2nd floor, and then window openings that match window openings on the rest of the building. So this building is constructed of high quality materials and does not have any blank facades, and articulation does continue on all facades, with the alley elevation being slightly simpler than the Washington and Welton Street elevations. So in terms of the detailing of the building, the storefronts and windows will be aluminum, and so will that glass connector element. Again, there will be planter boxes at the base of the building, especially along Welton Street, just to really key in that this is not a primary entrance into the building and to help direct people to the primary entrance along Washington Street. But here you can see the transition between the historic Rossonian and the new infill hotel. There is horizontal banding on the new infill, and it does have a decorative stepped parapet and cap, but it's a very, very simple interpretation of the more decorative cornice that you see on the historic Rossonian, but does have that proportional relationship. Around the windows, there will be some decorative brick banding on the building base. The windows are significantly inset into the wall plane, and then on the upper stories, that inset does decrease a little bit, but all windows will have appearance of punched openings. There will be sills on these windows, and then the window proportions do relate to the Rossonian as well. And just like the rebuilt storefronts of the Rossonian, we'll have metal kick plates with large plate glass and transom above. So here's a detail of that decorative brickwork around those windows. Again, deeply inset into the facade, as you can see in section 3, with that decorative brickwork. So in terms of the window proportions, the large glass portion of the windows does relate to the sizes of the windows on the historic Rossonian. However, it does have a side light and some lights below. Those mullion patterns align with the sill pattern of the Rossonian, and all the header heights on the new addition are the same as the header heights for the historic Rossonian. So the openings really do have a proportional relationship to the historic Rossonian while being a modern contemporary interpretation. While these are not double hung windows, they will be fixed windows. Again, we feel that that proportional mullion patterning in the new windows and the deeply inset nature of these windows does create a contextual relationship with the Rossonian. And you can see how the storefronts will align too with the new rebuilt storefronts of the Rossonian and the new storefronts of the addition. Here are the windows on the upper story. So again, still inset into the wall plane, still with that decorative brick detailing, but not as elaborate as on the lower portion of the building. This is the rooftop deck that is proposed for the 4th floor. So the design guidelines do encourage orientation towards Welton Street, and most of the rooftop uses are oriented towards Welton Street. There are 2 patios on Washington Street. However, Washington does have large scale development, and much of that is outside of the district. It's not facing directly onto single family residences, which was the concern when the guidelines were written about orienting patios on these buildings that are taller towards Welton Street. It also does encourage using these spaces as green spaces, and as you can see, there is a large amount of green space proposed on the roof of the Rossonian to kind of provide that buffer between those outdoor patio spaces for the new hotel use. So here are just the renderings of the proposed Rossonian. Again, staff are generally supportive of the phase 2 design details. We do feel that it is a high quality constructed building. The design details are compatible and deferential to the Rossonian while fitting in with the surrounding historic context. The only thing that is not noted in our staff report, again, is the removal of that glass block from the Chamford building entrance and the entrance along Welton Street that we would like the commission to discuss a little bit further, but we are recommending approval of this project scope.
Thank you, Brittany. That was a lot to cover. Commissioners, do you have any questions for staff?
Good job.
So I have one question, just to get your take on this. In the application materials, they note that the glass block and the porthole doors were installed at the same time. But you're supportive of replacing the porthole doors with these other doors?
So I would ideally like all those elements to remain. I know the applicants have a historic consultant on board, so they might have some different thoughts on that. But again, I did not notice that initially when I was writing my staff report. So I would like the commission to discuss that a bit further with the applicant.
Understood. Thank you. George?
Was in the previous iterations, which I think were before my time, was there a plot plan for parking?
So they will be sharing parking with the Lydian development, which is this development to the south on the screen, this one here. It is also owned by Palisade Partners. So they're going through the site development plan review process where they have to provide sufficient evidence of parking, but that's not something we would specifically look at.
That's gonna have open density, so.
I think we're ready to hear from the applicants. You're the same folks, but if you wouldn't mind giving your name and address again. for us.
On the camera.
And turning on the camera.
And just let me know when you want me to change slides, which are not showing for some reason. Let me try this again.
Just a minute.
I normally have 2 screens.
Thank you. My name is Brad Gassman with Crane Architecture, 2490 Welton Street.
Dan Crane, Crane Architecture, 2490 Welton Street.
Matt Mueller, Palisade Partners, 2700 South Broadway.
So I'd like to, first of all, thank Brittany for her report and all of her guidance through this process. Also like to thank the commission for seeing us again. That was a couple months ago now. We were in here and wrapped up phase 1. This is a big step for us, so we're very excited about having this discussion on phase 2 of this project. I've put together, some really quick slides. I think Brittany did a really terrific job of kind of talking about all these things, but I'll do an abbreviated and kind of hit on some of the high points that I heard come out of the conversation that you guys just had. As a quick reminder, the Rossonian project is going to be a 150-seat restaurant with a bar and a music lounge on the ground level floor. There's an open expo kitchen, so if you remember last time, the plan around this building and the glazing at the storefront really exposes everything on inside. So there's a lot of activity at the ground floor we're excited about. Above, there's going to be a 90-key hotel, and in the lower level, there'll be a 200-seat hotel conference space. Next slide, please, Brittany. So there's kind of a couple big picture items we'll kind of talk through here just to keep it short. But like Brittany kind of alluded to, this is really 2 projects in one. So one is the historic rehabilitation of the existing Rossonian, and then the other is the design detail and infill construction project of the new build that we're looking at. We've worked extensively with a historic preservationist and a masonry expert actually as we've gone and evaluated the structure. So what we'll really talk about in the habilitation portion of it is really about the stabilization and cleaning, repair and restoration, and the replacement in kind that we'll be doing. And then when we get into the infill, we'll talk a lot about sort of the drivers that allowed us to make design decisions as we move forward. Next slide, please. Well, I'll kind of pop through these pretty quickly, but we've done a significant job going around and identifying areas in the building that needed to be stabilized and cleaned. So the existing masonry on the historic building will be preserved, cleaned, and repaired where necessary. We will be anchoring the historic brick back to new interior furring walls that we'll be building. So We'll be using the interior structure to help stabilize the existing walls. And we'll continue to work with these experts as we move forward to make sure we're making the right moves along the way. Next slide, please. We have some pretty significant cornice and parapet details in this building, and we're very lucky that most of it is intact. There's a couple sections that have been removed, but they are inside the building, waiting for restoration. So we have the ability to take these, we will take all the cornice and parapet details and be repainting and restoring to match the existing, and using as much of the existing as possible. We'll probably be able to reuse almost a majority of it. There's just a couple little areas that will have to be rebuilt. Moving on to the next slide, talk really quickly about the signage. It's a very important aspect to this, but we have two signs. They're not original to the building, but they were placed, we believe, in the 30s. So the entry canopy above the door at the historic point of the project will be rehabilitated and reused. The lighting will be put back into it, so it'll work as it originally was designed to function. And then the Rossonian sign along Welton will be the same. We'll restore that light and sign so that it functions like it originally did. Next slide, please. Wanted to talk about this balcony here really quickly. Brittany went over this in her presentation as well, but this is the one area in the building where we have an original door and window in this balcony. So there's two balconies on the second floor and third floor stacked on top of one another. So we will be taking these doors and restoring them so that they have the same look as they originally did, and then maintaining that historic railing that's there as well. Historic railing doesn't meet code, so we're going to come back and slide a very simple glass railing behind that to meet code. But it's really interesting, all the changes and everything that's happened to this building over time. We do have some original elements here that we can make sure that we bring back. Next slide, please. Now, this is kind of just a little bit of a catch-all to talk about the replacement of the windows, doors, and storefront. So everything other than those two doors we just talked about has been replaced, even probably more of it replaced prior to the 95 renovation. So there's been a lot of changes over time, but what we have learned from reviewing historic photos is the patterning and the type of window and scale is very similar to what there is now to what there was in the past. So we're actually using this as our guide, and we'll be replacing in kind all the windows and doors at the ground level and all the windows above the project as well. Slide, please. So I wanted to kind of get into a little bit about the infill project and the design development aspect of it now. So there's a couple slides here to look through. I think this one is along Welton Street. It does a really nice job of showing the base and the upper level setback and the simplified detail and patterning of the infill building as it relates to the historic. Next one, please. And then this is along Washington Street, and you see that the upper portion of the building is set back pretty significantly. You see some of that detailing that references the historic building wrap around the corner, but really the primary facade here is that historic building along Washington. Next slide, please. So really quickly, kind of going through a little bit of the material palette. We've chosen very intentionally a very simple material palette. So the existing brick's going to be recleaned and repaired. So we know the color will come out a little bit more in it, but it's this very nice kind of latte colored brick. The infill brick, we are going to match the detail brick on the Rossonian. So if you look in those photos, there's some coining at the corners, and the top of the parapet there has a lighter colored brick, and we think it's appropriate to really match that to tie the new infill into the historic. And then one of the interesting things about the Rossonian, with all this detail, it's all done in a running bond. So that's something that we picked up on from a materiality standpoint that we have implemented into our design. And like we talked about earlier, the window profiles, we're using a historic window profile that would have been utilized kind of at the same time period the Rossonian was built as the window for the building moving forward. Next slide, please. So I want to just pause on this one really quickly because again, I think this does a nice job of kind of setting up the important architectural moves that we made with the new building as it relates to the historic building. So we really took an approach to simplify, keep the details very simplified, and do a high level of execution of them. We're bringing some stone details in that is similar to the little stone details that are used on the Rossonian. So there's some little areas on the Rossonian that have these very nice little simple details of stone that are brought in that helps break the scale down. Our detailing really reflects the historic detailing. It's a modern approach and it's of its time, but it's respectful and, as Brittany said, differentiates itself from the historic. Next slide, please. Just a couple of areas here just to focus in on before we wrap it up for questions is, the transitional element really was a very important piece for us, using that element to pull the new and the old buildings apart and kind of stitch them together. We're using the existing datums that are on the historic building in this glass piece that transitions between the old and new. It reflects the historic patterning, but then it helps us tie the new building into that historic pattern. Next slide, please.
Since the timer's not showing.
Just really quickly to kind of look at some of the detailing here and how it relates to the historic. We have very simplified sills. It reflects the sill projections, but it's much more crisp and subtle. Storefront reflects the historic storefront detailing and hierarchy with steel columns dividing the bays, just as we did with it, or as they did with the historic building. And these are these elements that we use to tie these two buildings together. Next slide, please. This is just a detailed close-up. We saw this in Brittany's presentation too, but just shows you how kind of this subtle simplification of the details we see on the Rossonian get played out here. And then the final slide, just to kind of summarize, I think our approach has been of its time. It's reflective of the historic, but also respectful of this historic. I think it's a successful unification of the old and the new. And it's kind of a fun approach to setting a historic building off and tying it back into the neighborhood. One thing I'd like to go over really quickly is the glass block discussion. So that's a discussion we've had going back a number of years in the office. So when we were working with our historic preservationists, we looked back and noticed that the 1938 photos, which is about the oldest photo we have that actually shows the building, actually showed those as just single glass panel doors with side lights on both sides. That's what it appears to show. And then it shows the same, we believe, on Welton Street. We don't have a great photo, but we know there's that historic precedent based on what we see at the corner. The glass block was replaced in 1995, so we don't know exactly, other than looking at a photo dated, we believe, from around the 50s, exactly what that looked like and how it was detailed. And another thing that we've taken into consideration is the National Historic Register nomination looked at the period of significance. I believe it was 1929 to 1945. And we know that the glass block is late 40s, early 50s. We know that was probably brought in based on the cars that are actually in the photo. So doing that research, we actually came back to the conclusion that we wanted to go back and use one of the more original entry ideas that we saw in that photo right there, and bring more glass in and not have such an opaque kind of condition at the entry. So that's kind of just a really quick summary of everything that we've thought about and have put in energy we put into the project, detailing the project. I'll ask Matt and Dan if there's anything you think I missed.
I think we're out of time. You were just some questions I was going to have, so we let you go over.
Gotcha.
but we should stop now.
Gotcha.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicants?
One quick question, it looked like on the drawing set that the canopy on the chamfered corner, I wasn't seeing the signage shown there that you are talking about restoring. But that is the intent to restore that, so, yeah, I guess just the commissioners that we might wanna make sure that that gets in the drawings for final. And then I guess one other question, the railing on those recessed balconies, you were saying that the glass was needed for it to meet current code. If there's not a change of use, does it actually even need to meet current code? Or is that something that is because it's such a significant redevelopment that everything kind of needs to meet?
So our discussions have been because it's a significant redevelopment
Okay,
and we're doing so much work to the interior that we needed to bring that up to eco compliant.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I did have one, I just wanted, going back to the glass block and the signage, and the porthole. So it looks like that 1938 photo doesn't really show any of those features.
It doesn't.
And so is your understanding that, were they all introduced at the same time? Those three elements, the signs, the glass block and the porthole.
So the only photo is the lower left-hand photo here. That's the only photo we can find. And at that photo, they all appear to be there. And we're saying that that's circa 1950. It's definitely plus or minus, but that's the first image that we see that applied to the building.
Okay.
So that's the best way I can describe it, is that's the image that shows kind of all of it in place at that time.
Could you remind us of the period of significance, Brett?
So for the historic register, it's 29 to 45. So that's what the application was.
For
And then
the local designation,
Right.
it's up until 1965.
65, okay. So the staff report just didn't have dates in there, so
Oh, it didn't.
all good, unless, no, and I know you mentioned
I wrote
It's
this
like a
on a Saturday.
that. 42 Ford and a 48 Buick, right, in that picture. Your car guy too.
cars
right?
are always helpful. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I think we'll open it for public comment. If there's anyone here in person. Yes.
Chief Pryor, 2418 Champa, 5 Points Historic Cultural District Design Review Chair. The design detail, obviously broken down into the restoration and the new construction. Definitely the 5 Points Bid Board did support this application, and we felt that staff did an excellent job on reviewing the project, as did the design team, and coming up with the proposed design detail and how it ties into the historic structure, the color of the brick, the details on the windows, really pulling those from the primary structure into the addition. All very well done and well thought out of, yet subordinate and simplified to not distract from the primary gem of what the Rossonian is. And so we are definitely in support of this design detail. As far as the glass block and the porthole windows go, I definitely would side with the research that the applicants did do. And that the transparency on this is definitely more key to what we see as to what needs to happen on the street currently and today, and how that would activate the corridor and really bring light, vibrancy, and activation to this corner. And that opaqueness in the 1995 center blocks really does reflect more of a different era of the corridor, which is not something that currently is what we're trying to aspire and what we're trying to activate to. And so there is historic precedent for the transparency that they're projecting. And I think that that would be where we would like to see the corridor and would like to see the commission land, because it does lend more true to the original structure and lend more true to what we'd like to see on the corridor. So thank you for consideration.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Someone online.
Okay, we have one online. John, ask you to join us.
All right, hey there, can you hear me?
Yeah, and just a reminder, you have up to 2 minutes if you begin with your name and address, please.
Yep, thank you very much. My name is John. I live in the Point, which is across Washington Street, 2550 Washington. And I'd like to hear more about the parking situation. I heard someone mention that they were planning on using the Lydian's garage. I'm wondering whether sharing that garage with an already existing apartment building is going to be sufficient when we take into consideration the people who are staying in the hotel, going to the conference room, and going to the restaurant.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other commenters? No. Okay. Staff, Brittany, do you have any recap?
Yeah, I do have some recap. So I will like to remind the commission that 5 Points is the only district not designated for its architecture. I think, you have to kind of decide what preservation approach you're taking when you're looking at the glass block, determining if it is based on the applicant's testimony that was likely replaced in the 90s, which direction to go in terms of that. I will say there's 2801 Welton Street that was significantly altered during the period of significance, and the commission did approve it to go back to a more 1890s restoration. So we lost some of that kind of like fabric that has been added. So it's not out of character to remove things that were added in the period of significance in 5 Points. I just wanted to make it clear, did not note that in my staff report. I do think you see a lot of glass block in this district, and I think it adds somewhat to the character, but I think also there's an argument to be made about returning to an earlier time. In terms of the parking, that's not something we review here at this level. This project is going through the site development plan review process, in which zoning would look at all of those things regarding parking. If you have more questions, I would recommend reaching out to the applicants and property owners. They are also within this district, so they do know the constraints of parking in this district, but it's not something we would look at here at this level.
Okay, thank you. All right, commissioners will start deliberation. Anyone like to start off their thoughts? Okay.
I'm happy to. I would just like to say that I agree with staff generally, and I think the applicant, the architect, and the developer should be commended. I think this project, when realized, is certainly within the guidelines, is going to be a real asset to the community, just on a personal level. As it relates to the glass block and the question staff posed for this body, I would say my view is with that of the developer and the architect, and that going back to transparency is a good idea, not just from a retail perspective, but from a safety and security perspective. I think there's benefit to doing that versus making it darker, more blind. I think that was done in an era where it was more of a speakeasy situation with a bar and a quiet jazz club or whatever it was, the function in the first floor. And I think we've moved past that. And I think they have the precedent to stand on in order to do that.
I guess I'll just jump in and say, you know, when it comes to historic elements that have been introduced later but are considered historic, we, you know, generally don't want to pick and choose what when if they've existed at the same time. And so I think my concern is that there's the sign, which I think everyone agrees is a very character defining feature at this point on the hotel, but was not original to the building. And of course, they're planning to restore it. But my concern is to choose that, but not to choose the other elements that existed at the same time. Namely the glass block and possibly even the portholes. So I'm a little concerned about that. And you know, just going to your point, Nick, about kind of the speakeasy, that is one of the reasons why it's considered significant, is for its association with that jazz era and hosting entertainers that couldn't perform or be housed elsewhere in the city. So I guess that's where I kind of am a little concerned about picking and choosing between all those elements. If we're, again, I don't think anyone's saying the signs should go away, but if we're keeping that, we're kind of deciding for maybe not historic reasons to let the glass block go. And maybe that's okay, but I think that's why I would like to talk a little bit more about it.
I think it's an important distinction too between the National Register period of significance and then the local landmark cultural district. Again, not architecture that Brittany confirmed, which is the one layer that makes it a little gray, right? But you know, the piece of the puzzle that we're beholden to is the cultural district. And of course, the National Register nomination informs that. But that makes the date, you know, even harder to, I think it would be clean to say, if it goes through 1965, the glass block was clearly there. But it's the cultural district, not an architectural designation, right? Which is the nuance. So, you know, I think the flip side, Erica, to the sign, which is a good point, is all the rest of the windows and doors, which have already been replaced, similar to the glass block, you know, based on the applicant's research, is non-historic material, even if it's in the form of one of these periods of significance. I think keeping it for the sake of it being historic isn't the argument we can make. Not that that's the argument we're making, but you know, yeah, whether we paint with two brushes or one is kind of what it feels like here, right?
So, yeah, go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. I just pulled up in the guidelines, the intent statement around the guidelines for historic commercial facades. So it's intent statement 2S on page 51 of the guidelines.
Sorry, is this the general guidelines? Or
Yeah,
the
sorry,
5
it's the
points?
general guidelines, yeah, good point. So on general guidelines, the intent statement is to preserve the original character defining features of the historic, commercial, mixed use or civic building because they assist with the interpretation of the building's history and significance. So I wonder what the other commissioners think in the context of that. Do these features, even though they are architectural, and maybe this is more cultural district, do those architectural features assist with the interpretation of the cultural history and significance of this building? And my gut feeling is yes, because it's firmly within, you know, as we've talked about, the kind of jazz era, and those features have the quality, visual qualities that kind of bring that era to mind, I think, more than just a clear storefront.
I agree with you, Larry. Rusty or George, any thoughts?
I just can't get emotional with glass block. So, it's they're a feature that are recognizable as a period of history, and certainly going past the Rossonian as often as I do every day, I do notice them, but I can't see them being an obstacle to approving the plan.
So you would be in favor of letting them go? Or being replaced?
Yeah, I'm in favor of letting it go as well. I think there's valid arguments, obviously, on either argument. I just think that for, you know, a contemporary reuse of an historic structure, the original treatment is perfectly appropriate.
Thank you, Rusty. Any other thoughts?
Maybe just to tie a last one back to the actual 5 points district guideline, it talks about the 9 designated buildings. And it mentions that while they're, you know, not designated for architecture, they do retain a high degree of integrity. And that integrity shall be preserved. I think in this case, a lot of the integrity of the Rossonian is being preserved. And because the doors kind of fall on that knife edge, you know, I could be comfortable with allowing it per plan as well. However you define that integrity, right? The openings are there, it's the same size, it's the chamfered front, it's all of the pieces we've talked about. So I do think it's a nuance, but I'm willing to approve as submitted.
And I'll just remind us, there's 6 of us today, so we need to have 5 in order for this to you know, reach a quorum. So 5 voting in the same directions.
I also just looking at the 5-point standards and guidelines. There are standards which you must comply to in this district, and there are guidelines that are recommendations. So a guideline in this district is where original features survive, consider retaining them and incorporating them into the new rehabilitation scheme. So it's just a recommendation here. Again, the applicant has stated that these particular blocks are probably from the 1990s restoration, but just want to throw that out there.
And in that reading, you read original as being equivalent to historic, meaning not necessarily original to the building, but also historic.
That is only something we did for the La Alma Lincoln Park to provide that clarity. We didn't provide that clarity here in 5 points, to be honest with you. But here on page, if you look at the 5 points guidelines, you can see 2801 Welton Street. You can see it's what it looked like before it was restored. That's what it looked like during the period of significance. That's what it looked like when Juneteenth was founded in that building. You can see now that that building was returned to a more 1890s appearance. So it's not atypical of the district to go back to an earlier state. And that's on page, again, 35 of the 5 points guidelines.
Yeah, and I will say that for the sake of establishing more, I could support what the applicants have proposed on general guidelines 2.44, restore an altered storefront to its original design, given that it's clear that this was an alteration from the original hotel looked like. So I do think it's a bit of a judgment call.
Okay, would anyone like to make a motion?
Chair, we'll move to approve application 2024-COA-373 for the Rossonian roof reconstruction and rehabilitation and phase 2 design details for new infill addition at 2650 Welton Street as per design guidelines 3.1 through, well, no, they're not sequential. 3.1, 3.2, 3.4, 3.6, 4.1, 4.6, 4.21 through 4.23, 4.27, 4.31, 4.34, 4.38, 4.40, 4.42, 4.43, 4.48, 5.32, 5.45 through 5.47, 5.70, 6.43, 6.45, character defining features for the 5 Points Historic Cultural District, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report.
Thank you, Grant. Do you have a second? George, thank you. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstained? Okay, motion carries. And I'd just like to say, I think it points to the success of the design that we focused on these details rather than the bigger thing that I think we all, found to be very compatible with the historic district. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, next we'll move on to design review project 2024-COA-371 at 715 Gilpin Street in the East 7th Avenue Historic District. And we'll hear from Crystal for the staff report and recommendation.
Great, thank you. Okay, so today we're talking about the property at 715 North Gilpin Street, which was constructed in 1925 and is a contributing structure to the East 7th Avenue Historic District. According to the building inventory for the district, the house is classified as a California Spanish one-story style structure. The applicant is requesting to demolish 37.4% of the wall area of the contributing structure to add a one-story side and rear addition, which you can see here wraps the rear and side of the home on the site plan. Here on the right are photos of the structure. The front facade elevation will not have any changes. The existing garage at the bottom that you can see here will also be demolished to construct a new two-car garage. So here you can see the amount of wall demolition, which is the entire rear wall of the structure and a large portion of the south side of the structure. As you can see here, the front facade again will remain unchanged, and there are minimal changes to the north elevation towards the rear of the structure. Staff did have concerns about the proposal meeting design guideline 3.5, which states to do not damage historic building fabric or obscure key character defining features of the primary structure when building an addition, and to minimize the removal of original building fabric when attaching an addition. The one-story addition will be connected to the side and rear of the structure and will protrude out into the existing side yard. The new addition, like I said, will remove that 37.4% of the contributing structure and will damage the south side elevation, which is the historic facade, but will avoid impacting the building structural systems and preserve the front facade overall. Next slide. So the new one-story side and rear addition is proposed to have this cross gable tile roof to match the existing structure. Though the new roof line will be set lower than the existing roof line's height, as you can see here on the left. Staff had a few concerns about how the addition met design guideline 3.1, which states to locate an addition to be subordinate to the original structure and place an addition to the rear of the original structure whenever possible. The proposed one-story addition is at the rear, but also the side of the contributing structure. However, it is set back from the front facade. And though it does wrap a large portion of this structure, may not, we weren't sure if it was fully subordinate, but it is lower and set back. So staff was mixed on that. Next slide. So here you can see the side elevations for the addition, as well as the new garage at the rear of the lot that will be accessed from the alley. The new addition will be clad in reclaimed hard pressed brick and will be painted to match the existing structure's white stucco. And at the bottom, you can see the rear elevation of the addition. New windows and doors will be aluminum clad wood by Sierra Pacific, and new windows will be multi-light with a simulated divided light and cast stone sills, which differentiate it from the brick sills on the existing structure. The addition or the alterations also include new egress windows at side elevations. Next slide. So the new addition will be differentiated from the primary structure with that change of material to a hard pressed brick, as the original structure is stucco, and a change in height, as the new addition will be set somewhat lower than the existing structure's roof line. Next slide. Here you can see the materials proposed for the new addition, as well as the new proposed windows. The windows will have a minimum 2-inch inset and will have a brick mold surround. And here you can also see the reclaimed tile roof that'll match the existing structure. Next slide. And then finally, here's just a nice metric of the proposed addition from a street view. Though staff did have a few concerns about the design guidelines that I pointed out during this presentation. The applicant has made changes to the overall design to make the addition meet design guidelines 3.1 through 3.10 overall. Therefore, staff is recommending approval.
Okay, thank you, Crystal. Next we can hear, or I'm sorry, do commissioners have any questions for staff?
I do.
Yeah.
Probably staff and applicant, but maybe staff can put this to rest now. There's existing sort of decorative random brick that shows through the stucco on the street elevation of the house. And also a brick arch over the doorway, and I don't see those replicated in any of the drawings. Is that something that's considered historic and needs to be preserved?
Yes.
Both?
On the front elevation of the house, there's not proposed to be any changes. So although maybe it wasn't rendered properly, from what I understand, they're not supposed to be making any changes to the actual front facade.
Got it. Yeah, because the note says no changes to historic features, but then you get to argue what's historic and what's not.
Right.
So that's why I asked.
Right. As far as I know, there aren't supposed to be any changes to that front facade whatsoever.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have the applicant with us or online?
He was online. Okay, I see someone else.
Is it Rebecca?
Yes.
So Rebecca, when you're able to, you can unmute, you can leave your camera off or turn it on, up to you. And you have up to 10 minutes, and please begin with your name and address.
Thanks. This is John Mattingly, 517 East Bayard, Denver 80209. I'll be doing the speaking today.
Okay, thank you.
Quickly to address that last comment, we just didn't render those existing masonry details that are integrated into the existing building, and they're not to be changed. We just didn't detail them. So good question on your part, but yeah, the answer is we're not altering the existing building at all. We also did not carry any of those particular details through to the addition. The idea here was to keep it like the original structure in form. We chose a reclaimed brick just because of the sizing of it. And the idea is to do a snap cut joint, trowel joint on the masonry, and then a light paint. So it reads like the same brick that's of the building, just without plaster on it. And so it has a like context, but different in presentation. So that's our change in materiality from the addition to the original structure. And then we kept the pitches the same on the additions. And the primary approach here was that dealing with the single-story building in this district, we have a context of detached garages in this area. And so we started with that and then maintained our distance from the building. And in so doing, it kind of limited us in direction. So that's where the side additions came from, is it preserves more of the open space, which is in context with the rest of the district in the rear. And we felt it was a gentle approach to come off the side. We have a small addition set back 12 feet from the primary facade. And the ridge on that little addition is 3 feet beneath the primary ridge of the building. So considerably subordinate to the primary structure, although it is off the side. We wanted to make sure it was, completely subordinate. We had the next area projecting beyond that, as you can see, is also, I think that one is 1 foot 2 inches below the primary ridge. And so still the primary building is really obviously seen from the street. So that was our effort in keeping it subordinate. In the rear addition, we did the same thing roof form wise, where as opposed to carrying the roof all the way across, we brought that even the addition is subordinate to the primary building. And so the original roof structure, ridge to ridge, is seen in the roof form itself. And so we thought that was a good solution. We came to that conclusion after our first round with staff. We had some higher ridges with some vaulting going on, which was hurting that subordination, and they made comment of that. So we made some adjustments and feel like the result was a much more gentle and subordinate presentation. So that was the overall design approach, and not really having anywhere to go off of the back and trying to create a little bit more of a balance on this California bungalow led us to the subtle side additions and rear, keeping the open space alive in the backyard with that garage being detached. There is a large site wall in the back. There's a pretty substantial grade change on this property, but that much of the property would stay, and we're just going to integrate the garage into the grade and into that site wall. You can see some design details with the arched doors and those balustrades. We were playing off of the arches that are in the masonry on the front of the house, but not copying the detail. So there's some nods to what the idea of the original building were, and then differentiation. But in the shadows, I think it's a very cooperative addition. And then the clear delineation between old and new can be seen to the observer on the sidewalk. So that was our approach. Did I forget anything? Yeah, I think that pretty much sums up the design approach and how we arrived at this proposition. So
Okay,
I'll leave it at that.
okay, thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant? Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have any public comments on this project? Okay. All right, Crystal, anything you'd like to add? Okay. All right, commissioners, what do you think?
I'll start. I support staff. I think it's a very responsible design and will be an asset to the neighborhood.
Thanks.
I agree with the staff report. I think these one-story bungalows are challenging, and I think this is a good response that meets the intent of the guidelines.
I'd like to just add that it was a good reminder that because the decorative brick that you pointed out, Nick, wasn't replicated on the drawings or the renderings, it was easy to think that maybe the addition was even more replicative than it is, but it was a good reminder that those aren't on the addition. And so the complexity of decoration that's on the original building isn't being replicated on the addition, which for me was, yeah, just a solid like, oh yeah, okay, this works. So.
And I think they should also be commended for not adding a second story or trying to do that. A one-story with a one-story addition is, and pushing out to the side, it's certainly more desirable in my view than going up.
Yeah, it's nice to have the space to do that and it still support that. So
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with it meeting the guideline.
So even though staff had some reservations about meeting guidelines 3.1 and 3.5, I think it sounds like you're feeling like that this is a good compromise with those. Right, would anyone like to make a motion?
Madam Chair. I move to approve application 2024-COA-371 for the side and rear addition at 715 North Gilpin Street as per design guidelines 3.1 through 3.10, presented testimony, submitted documentation and information provided in the staff report.
Thank you, Nick. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Larry. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstained? The motion carries. You can work with Crystal to get your certificate of appropriateness.
Madam Chair, can I request a break for a couple of minutes?
Sure. Why don't we take 5 minutes?
Well, that'd be plenty.
Okay, great. Thank you. We'll reconvene in 5 minutes. number 2024-COA-370 at 200 Gaylord Street in the Country Club neighborhood. And Brittany is our staff person.
So our next project is for alterations to a contributing structure in the Country Club Historic District. They are proposing to add a new second floor addition to the south wing, which you can see over here, that will complement the non-historic addition that was installed sometime in the 1960s. Don't know an exact date, but a second floor addition when this addition was planned was also planned for the south wing, however, was never constructed. The north wing addition will also be modified to make it appear as an addition and less replicative of the existing historic structure. So here is the proposed site plan. There are some rear addition alterations that staff already reviewed and approved administratively, and as well as some site work that staff have also already approved. So all we're looking at today is really the modifications to the second floor north wing and a new proposed addition on the south wing. So the new south wing addition will be for 2 new bathrooms, as you can see in the proposed second floor plan. And the existing brick of the north wing addition will be removed, and the addition will be reclad in wood paneling siding. The window openings will be altered slightly on this addition, and that broken pediment detail will be eliminated from the design. Staff strongly believe that the broken pediment detail is from the 1960s, as it doesn't quite match the broken pediment that you see on the historic massing above the primary entrance. There's a lot more detail in that broken pediment on the historic structure with the urn detail that is not present on the pediments on the 2 wings. So those alterations will help distinguish the north wing as an addition, as the current brick and window opening patterns are very replicative currently. The new window openings will be slightly wider than the historic openings, but again, staff feels that it helps differentiate the addition as new, and the proportions are not totally out of scale with the Country Club Historic District. And the new south wing will just mimic that same design aesthetic as the new reskinning and alterations to the north wing. So here are those north elevation on the left and then the south elevation on the right. Again, they will be exactly the same. Those 2 wings, the north reclad with the wood paneling, and the south completely constructed with that wood paneling siding. It's a very small addition, as you can see in the footprint measurements. It is subordinate to the overall pitch and height of the existing historic structure, and the chimney that you can see in the south elevation will remain in the interior. The existing does have 2 windows adjacent to the chimneys that will be modified into doors to allow access into that space, and no other demolition will occur with the construction of the south addition. Here's just the rear elevations of both of those elements. The new addition on the south wing is on the left side of your screen this time, and the alterations to the existing north is on the right side of your screen. So there will be window openings on the rear elevation, and that wood cladding will continue with just a flat roofing material. So here is just a perspective proposed. Staff are recommending approval of this project with a very small condition that the window section be updated to reflect the window section through the addition, as the current window section is through a brick portion, which relates to the work I have already reviewed and approved. But it does appear that these windows will be inset into the wall plane. So we're just requesting confirmation of that and that section detail, just to confirm that they will have shadow lines.
Okay, thank you, Brittany. Any questions for staff? Commissioners? All right, I think we can hear from the applicants now. Welcome. You have up to 10 minutes, and if you begin with your name and address.
Turn on.
Oh, yes.
Let me know if you need help.
Hi, my name is Julie Doman. I am the designer and also the owner of the proposed home. I want to thank Brittany for helping us. We had a few iterations and I think we landed in a good spot of what the house wants to be. Main goal is to bring the intended symmetry back to the house and really highlight the main facade. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Short and sweet. Do we have any comments from the public on this project? Doesn't look like it. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to ask commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant?
And just really quickly.
Yes.
We already discussed this as a commission, but I think Rusty should announce that he knows the applicant.
Yeah, I have potential conflict. Julie is a former employee of Simple Brown Design. I can be fair and impartial despite that, if that's acceptable to everyone.
Just wanted that on the record.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. All right, so no public comment. Brittany, do you have anything else to say?
I do not.
Okay. All right, I think we're ready to deliberate. Commissioners, what are your thoughts?
Looks pretty open and shut to me. I don't think I think the recalling or the improvement to looking like a new design or not being an original design is actually a good idea on that.
For the existing.
That side with removing the brick, you know. For me, I don't think this is a challenging proposal at all.
Any other thoughts?
Hate to take away the brick.
All right, well, if there's no other comments, would anyone like to make a motion?
I'm happy to.
Thanks, Nick.
Madam Chair, I move to approve with conditions application 2024-COA-370 for the second story addition and alterations to the north wing second story addition at 200 Gaylord Street as per Country Club Design Guidelines B7 E1 F3 Design Guidelines 3.3 through 3.9, character defining features for the Country Club Historic District, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report with the condition that the window section be updated to reflect the wood paneling and windows be inset at least 2 inches into the wall plane.
Thank you, Nick. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Graham. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstained? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, that concludes our design review projects for today. We don't have any business items, but we do have some discussion items that we'll hear from Becca Duchow.
Sorry, Becca, let me navigate my 2 screens here.
No worries. Oh, yeah. So just to go over our discussion item process, I will announce them from our agenda. Staff will introduce the informational item or item for discussion. The commission will then discuss amongst ourselves and with staff. And this item does not need to have any actions or votes taken by us. So our discussion items are the designation customer guide and designation application materials for both individual landmarks and historic districts.
So in theory, you have control. Oh, I have control in theory. Okay. So this is just a discussion item for you today, mostly informational. And we'll be back for more if you have further discussion. But this is for a brand new designation customer guide and an updated designation application. We're bringing it to you for information discussion today, but we'll also be back on July 23rd for any final comments.
We wanted to start the discussion today by giving you a little background on the designation process as laid out by Chapter 30 of the Denver Revised Municipal Code, and the changes to the program that have been made in an effort to increase the diverse history represented by Denver landmarks. And in theory, I have control. There we go. So just as a little background for some of our newer commissioners, the requirements for becoming a Denver landmark are found in Chapter 30 of the Denver Revised Municipal Code. These requirements are shown on this slide before you. Denver is unique in the country for requiring a property to meet 3 out of 10 significance criteria. Many other cities follow the National Register's guide requirements and require a property to only meet 1 out of 4 criteria. And then conversely, Denver allows structures 30 years of age to become a landmark, while many programs across the country require structures to be at least 50 years old, which is again within keeping of the National Register standards. As a result of these requirements, Denver landmarks, particularly with our city council members and members of the public, are known for having a depth to their stories. They have significance in many different areas, such as history, architecture, and culture, rather than just one category. So while the depth of significance has been our standard for several years, we continually evaluate our ordinance and the landmark program to ensure that we're encouraging equity in designations and that our ordinance is serving the Denver community. The last time we did a major deep dive into our ordinance was in 2018 and 2019, when landmark staff convened a task force to review the landmark ordinance. The task force was made up of members of city council, preservation professionals, local developers, members of the public, and our very own landmark commissioners. We had many goals in this task force, as you can see below. It took us over a year. But one of the main goals of the task force was to update the landmark ordinance to address community and council concerns about the designation process, including demolition review, owner post designations, and the criteria for designation. So you can see the goals of the task force, and the ones that are highlighted under number 1 and 3 are what we're going to talk about today. During the task force process, the significance criteria for designation were updated to include 3 new criteria covering cultural significance as a way to encourage designation of structures that may be culturally significant to a community, but which may have previously been unrecognized under our old criteria. At this time, we also made very minor changes to the design designation application, which included adding a resource table, providing a template inventory table for historic districts, and updating our guidance about architectural descriptions. So the application that you saw included in your materials has those changes made. It also simplifies the architectural description greatly, removing the requirement for a facade by facade description of all of the features when high quality photographs are available. We've heard from a lot of people that have a really hard time writing that architectural description. And so if there are high quality photos, we have said that that is sufficient. If there aren't photos, they do need to provide that facade by facade description. So those are just a few examples of how changes that were made directly in response to the task force's comments that were designed to simplify the application process. The task force also recommended putting together a designation customer guide to help applicants apply for designation and reduce barriers to designation for community members. So with that in mind, in 2020, Landmark staff began drafting a customer guide. Naively, I thought that I could get this done in about 6 weeks, and here we are 4 years later. The guide was aimed at 2 audiences: community members who are new to preservation, as well as preservation professionals who had written designation applications previously. The aim of the guide is to provide a template for community members who are seeking designation while providing clear expectations for what should be included in a designation application. In some cases, including owner-opposed designations, designation applications cannot be amended after they have been submitted. So staff hopes that this guide will inform applicants of the required information for a complete and sufficient application. To do so and to create this guide, we started looking at the National Register Bulletins number 15 and 16, which provide guidance on applying National Register criteria and filling out the National Register nominations forms, but which are completely boring and mind-numbing to read and quite a struggle to get through. Staff also looked to peer cities such as New York, San Francisco, and Austin to determine what guidance these cities were providing their applicants. Staff did not find any comprehensive guides to writing designation applications, though many municipalities, including Denver, have detailed information about how to research historic properties, as well as detailed information about the process of designation. But there does seem to be a gap between how to write or how to research a property and then how to put it into context in a historic designation and bring it forward through the designation process. We found that for people who do not have a technical or professional familiarity with historic preservations and concepts such as historic integrity, periods of significance, historic context and significance, this can be quite a barrier. So this designation customer guide is aimed to provide that information in a clear and straightforward manner while encouraging high quality, well-researched designation applications. In 2022, Landmark staff met with community stakeholders, including Historic Denver, community members who had an interest in preservation, RNO members, and preservation consultants. At these meetings, staff discussed the existing designation application, collated common questions that arose when writing designations, and provided a draft designation guide for review. Staff incorporated many of these comments into future iterations of the draft. Staff also utilized commission deliberation on designations, both those that had been approved and those that had been denied to inform this guide. And additionally, in 2022, the entire Landmark staff reviewed the designation customer guide, providing comments and feedback over several different meetings. We tallied it, our staff has almost 70 years of combined experience with the Denver Landmark Preservation Commission. And so this was a wealth of knowledge that people had, sharing how this body has viewed designations in the past. At this point with the staff, it was determined that there should be two guides, one for individual landmarks and one for historic districts. The content for the guides is pretty similar, but there are some additional requirements for historic districts, and it was easier to just separate the two. All right, so one important thing that we really weighed when we were making this guide and thinking about the updates to the designation application is really balancing the requirements. What does City Council expect to see in a designation application? You know, they talk at length about the depth of the stories that are being told, the cultural, the architectural significance, all that's really important to them. We also have the commission, who's made up of preservation professionals who are looking for certain things in designation applications. And then finally, Landmark staff, when they're doing design review, you know, they need certain things laid out in the designation application itself about contributing, non-contributing, character defining features. So this is all really important information to have. At the same time, we also understand that public capacity to write a designation application can be strained. You know, a lot of people who are interested in preserving buildings don't have a master's degree in historic preservation. So trying to make the application accessible to them or provide resources for them so that they can write a successful application is really important. Additionally, some people hire consultants to write these designation applications, and it's important that we think about how much time does it take to write an application and what cost would that be if the public is not doing it themselves. So one really important component of the guide is actually, the layout. These guides follow the designation application step by step, providing guidance on how to fill out application, definition of key terms, such as integrity, which is not the same as historic or structural integrity, and what is a historic context, and includes suggested formats for writing different sections, though this is by no means how it has to be written. One pitfall that staff has often seen is that information is simply in the wrong place. Statements of significance encompass the entire historic context. Historic contexts are only descriptions of the previous property owners. And so while staff can normally help applicants and guide them through and help fix these problems, sometimes applications cannot be edited. And so it is really important that we get an application that is complete and sufficient so that it can be reviewed by the Landmark Preservation Commission. So in 2023, Landmark worked with an outside consultant to format the guides, providing easy reading and screen reader accessibility, the use of graphics to illustrate specific concepts such as resources, character defining features, call-out boxes, and compare and contrast sections, all provide visual interest and prevent the document from being too visually overwhelming. So that is just a brief overview of these guides that are before you today. So the next step for this guide, it includes receiving any commission feedback and public feedback on the document before its official release. As the designation customer guide and the application do not alter the requirements for landmark designation as laid out in chapter 30, and they do not alter the designation process, adoption of the application and designation guide does not need to follow the formal rulemaking process, which would require a formal public hearing. However, staff would like the commission and the public a chance to review all of these documents, which is why we're doing this in 2 periods. We didn't feel like it was fair to give you a week to review this if you wanted to take a closer look. This will also allow the public to provide comments through the standard public comment policy. So as such, you're seeing the designation guide today as a discussion item, and we'll have a second discussion item July 23rd. One note is that in the week since we publicly posted these guides, we found some errors and some typos. So those will be updated. So you will get updated copies when we send that out for the July 23rd meeting. And so after the guide and application are effective, we will announce it via updates to our through our e-blast on our website and through our preservation partners.
Great, thank you, Becca. Yeah, so this is discussion. Does anyone want to start off by questions or comments? I'll just start by saying I think it's great 2 documents, the guides themselves, and I think are very engaging visually, and I really appreciated the guidance on historic context versus statement of significance. I think those are really important, but I think it's also open enough that it's not, sometimes the National Register can feel very rigid in how it's instructing people to consider these questions. So I think it strikes the right balance of providing guidance without being overly prescriptive on how those should be. So yeah, kudos to that. I do have a few typos that probably you've noticed, and I can send those on to you.
I would love it.
I don't need to go through them by
Appreciate
detail. I think the one thing I wanted to raise, and I'd be curious to hear what other commissioners think about this, is the question of contributing versus non-contributing when it comes to features, which is, there seems to be both a feature being something that's like a site feature, landscaping, walls, or things like that, gazebos, but then there seems to be a reference to features on like the primary structure itself. And to me, I feel like the calling out features that have changed over time on a historic building are important. One, to assess historic integrity, but also to provide guidance in the future for design review as far as what's historically important or not. But I feel like designating them as non-contributing can get very complex very fast. And so I just would like to maybe suggest revisiting whether that's the right approach for that. Or should it just be that when discussing major alterations, even having a list of like major alterations and when they occurred and, therefore outside of period of significance. Right.
It's an alteration.
Right. So that's my one kind of big thought. And I don't know if that makes sense to other commissioners or not.
Just a question, how many applicants for individual designation use a consultant? And how many are do-it-yourself kind of thing?
That's a great question. It really varies. I would say we're starting to see more and more people go with consultants. And fewer people doing it by themselves. And I think in part that is due to the application requirements. It's a pretty technical document. And so, I think also a lot of times if a community member comes forward and says, hey, I'm really interested in designating this building, I don't have the means to do the application myself. We often refer them to Historic Denver, and Historic Denver can put them in touch with a consultant, or sometimes, they have very limited capacity, but sometimes they'll help write the designation application.
Some other issues. I, for one, would like to see somehow more outreach on how important this is and how advantageous it is to and I'm thinking pretty much for individual, homeowners. Also, if a generous dollop of the tax advantage could be put into the first documents that someone who is exploring this would get, the website or the first package, what does this mean to you in your pocket? What does this mean to you, for that? Yes, many people are in the position to be altruistic and Denver's culture is Denver's culture and it needs to be preserved, but there are those who still feel like, what's in it for me? Or you're not going to tell me what color to paint my house when we don't even care about that. These are, what are you not going to lose with designation? I think would be, because in the process of canvassing to the failed canvas for Park Hill to be designated as a historic district, those were complete lack of understanding as far as financial advantage, lack of understanding as to what do we control and what do we not control, and my wife and I personally visited 400 houses, and that was the big thing, was what color can I paint my house? And we say, paint it your favorite color, paint it all your favorite colors, it's okay, but they I think where you start there is where you start to get interest, and that is, then you kind of hook them with the tax advantage and the historic crowd they will be joining, as far as Denver's ancestors go. So just my thoughts.
Yeah, that's a point well taken. When we do meet with everyone who is interested in designating, and we give a little presentation, and it is very heavily on the what does this mean for your property, but I think our website may not be as clear on that, so we can definitely make sure that's clearer.
Creation of an outreach team that would make itself available for,
Oh, wouldn't we love that?
for conferences or presentations or something like that. Here's what we did and here's how we did it. I remember that old house that you mourned, went away. This is how it could have been saved or something like that. But anyway, I'm glad you're trying to make it simpler. We went through 7 revisions on our DIY applications, so. But
Erica, on your point question, so are you saying that if applicants are, I guess, getting too finely detailed about non-contributing features, that can become an issue for like later design review?
No, I mean, it seems like the impetus to do so would be to aid design review.
Yeah.
But I think I'm worried that at what point, a house could have multiple small alterations, and at what point is it worth counting as non-contributing or not? And so it seems to me it might be simpler just to think of the building itself as either contributing or non-contributing. And then if need be, needing that information about alterations, both to understand its integrity, but also to consider for design review in the future, maybe just having a list of those major alterations, rather than like counting and kind of, it seems to me it can become very confusing fast as to what should be counted or what should not, and
like the table.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Gotcha.
it's a little soft, but the rule of thumb that Jen Buddenborg gave us was, with the original owner recognize his house.
Right.
And
As far as
you
historic
can
integrity.
do a lot of little modifications. Yeah, that's my house. I mean, I don't know what they did with that roof, but and that would put yourself in their role. But when you start adding second floors that look like a 3-car garage dropped on top of a bungalow, no, that's not gonna fly.
I think one thing you said, Becca, that makes a lot of sense as we talk about it again and the public comment and everything is there aren't as many people even in the room on a normal day as who have preservation experience or master's degree, right? Which is easy to take for granted from this purely academic sense. And I think, to Erica's point, even just talking about and distinguishing a character defining, I mean, to a lot of folks who might be applying this, it's a great old building. I just like how it looks, right? I don't know if the cornice or the soffit or the parapet or and so, we've run into that a lot, I think, is we're taking something that's been not necessarily made complicated by, 60 some odd years of ordinances and regulation now, but it's been made very nuanced and academic. And I think, the fact that somebody does have to hire a consultant or feels like they would have to, it's great business for the consultants, but it really limits the pool. So, to the end that's a focus, I think that's important, and George, to your comment about the outreach or something like that, right? I think it's almost the opposite of this, where we're talking about people who are interested or excited about creating a designation is, and I know it's come up before, but that whole notification of like, hey, you bought a property in a landmark district, right? Are you aware of, because we would see a lot fewer window denials come through, right? I don't know if that's even appropriate to tie into this or not, but however, like a blast or distribution of these kind of public documents, I think that's another really common thread we see is like, I had no idea, right? Like I'm in one of these things that exists, but I didn't even know it, versus, hey, it's not so scary if you think about the advantages and the process, and we're trying to simplify that and make it a little more broad and approachable. So I know that's not a specific comment, I guess, but I appreciate you saying that, because I think there've been a few times we found ourselves on the defense a little bit, right? So we're not doing this because we want to, we're not trying to be mean, but it's what the ordinance says, or it's what the Secretary of Interior standards say. That's helpful context for everybody who's kind of approaching this process, I think. So I appreciate that comment that you made and that kind of intent and spirit of this, for sure. Yeah.
I think that comes across too, is just as far as how accessible these are or appear to be, that, I mean, that's one of the big things is like staff is there to help. Obviously, you're worn thin with your many tasks that you have to do, but I think your roles are fundamental in the success of this. And so I think conveying that through having this is an important first step too.
I just would ask, is Portland one of the cities you look at when you're
Portland, Oregon or Maine?
sort of balancing? And I only touch on that because, but 2 years ago, 3 years ago, if you're gonna take down a house built before 1910, you're doing it by hand. And you must recycle 40% of the materials into another structure, so.
Right.
There
it's
was a
not
question of Oregon or Maine,
Hmm?
Oregon or Maine, Portland.
Oh,
But
Portland, Oregon.
Yeah, clearly.
Yeah,
Not
we've
Oregon.
talked a lot about a deconstruction ordinance. Boulder also has enacted one, and it's something that came up during the task force a lot. And you guys should bug my superiors if you want to see that one go through.
Those are Kara Hahn and Jennifer.
Yeah. Call up Jen.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great document and the graphics are really great. Being someone who occasionally puts together 3D graphics, they did a lovely job, so.
It was really fun to work with non-preservationists who gave a stab at just
Yeah.
figuring out what historic buildings might look like and what their features are, and then, oh, that's really nice, but no, we're gonna, this is actually a gambrel roof. So, but yeah, it was great to work with. So that.
Well, I think too, I know the way the city's website is set up, there are certain things that I can't find twice, even when I try, right? And I think there's so many good documents like this, whether it's planning stuff or God forbid anybody actually like downloads the whole zoning code and reads through it, right? But that kind of thing happens. And so I think how this gets placed once it's available publicly too can make a big difference. Cause I find myself really often, sending links or, we have somebody who's got a building or approaches about a construction project. It's like, hey, you should, I think the state, like 1-page PDF summary on tax credits and, these kind of links to, well, think about this, look at this, this is the ordinance. And so making it accessible, even just where it's hosted, I think, knowing that it's 1 or 2 branches down the tree in the community planning and development, landmark ordinance, landmark commissions, and so as much as there's like something on that front page and I know there's the web blast that goes out monthly, right? If you're on that CPD email list and things too, but there's, a lot of good stuff that the city has published like this and some of it's not as easy to find. So I think to make sure that all your effort is easily findable as well as, digestible, right, as it is from the preservation perspective. So because we do get that kind of ask. I feel like often, like, what should I do? You're on the commission or you know about this. It's great to be able to send 2 or 3 links and know that someone who's really interested can read through that and figure out just about anything that they would need to, right? So however we can strategically place it where people can see it, I think would be a good thing too.
All right, well, I'll be back July 23rd if you have any further comments. Also feel free to email them or thoughts or typos, so.
Okay, thank you, Becca.
More than a grass pond at your front door.
All right, I think we are done with our agenda, so I will close the meeting, 3:14.
Okay.